So if you as an internal check system preparing the accounts and financial statement on time, so of course it is going to save the auditors precious time, and auditors is also going to be skipped from the liability of preparation of the final accounts in a time based manner. All right, then the next point is reliability of books of account. So whatever the books of account that you have prepared as an accountant, let's say I am an accountant in a company and I have prepared the, let's say, purchase books, sales books, and financial statement I have also prepared. So whatever the books of account I have prepared, the if the internal check system is there apart from the accountant, like I am an accountant and internal check system has already verified this point, that whether the accounts and financial statement prepared by me is correct or not. So they are satisfied with this and they are absolutely having no objective with regard to the accounts and financial statement that should be there in place. All right. Since no theory or no point is free from any sort of error, so similar is the case with the internal check as well, that there are certain cons of it, certain demerits of it. So the first is expensive. So when you want to apply the intensively the investigation of each and every piece of item with the help of internal check system or internal control system, you should have to hire the services of these people. But remember, they are going to report you the trendy things, they are going to report you whatever is coming in the trend, rather than what should have been the main cause of concern. All right. Then next is complacency among officials. So complacency among officials means that there is a complication, that X is already having the authority to do certain task, Y is also having the authority to do same sort of task, and we are having this complicated relationship that we are not able to understand who should do it, and because of this, nobody actually did any sort of task with regard to that. So this is a big problem until unless you don't define the problem, until unless you don't say uh, uh, estimate the problem, you will not be able to have the fruits or benefits of the internal check system. Then the next point is risky for the auditor. So what risky for the auditor is all about, that with regard to the risky for the auditor, we can say that uh, as an auditor, let's say if I am going in a company and auditing the accounts and financial statement, it might be quite possible that I may feel that I am able to save my time, but it may be quite possible that whatever the piece of information company is supplying to me, it may be having certain sort of errors, it may be having certain sort of fraud also, and I am just completely relying on this internal controls or internal check system. So you can say that this method is risky as well. All right, guys. So now let's move toward the principles of effective internal check. What are the different sort of principles that we are supposed to follow with regard to the internal check system? All right. So the first and foremost principle that we are able to understand is authority, duties, and responsibilities of each employee should be clearly defined. So each and every employee should be knowing what he or she is supposed to do. Each and every employee should be knowing what is the line of authority of that person. Each employee should be knowing what X is supposed to do, what Y is supposed to do, or what X plus Y both can do. So we should not only know our limits, but we should also know our responsibilities as well. So until unless I have not been informed about my duties and responsibilities, how would I be able to know that this is not the scope of work or this is not the nature of work that I'm supposed to do? Let's say, for example, I have given you work, but I did not tell you that you can purchase the material also. So what will happen, that you are supposed to just take in account that particular fact, that whatever the limitations of asset and the whatever the rights are associated with it, everything must be given to the people who have been entrusted with the duties and responsibilities. Then the second is division of work among staff should be on the basis of each person's capacity and capability. So it's not like this. Let's say, for example, I do not know how the cash flow statement is prepared, and I have been entrusted with the task of cash flow statement only because of the fact that I am able to prepare the final accounts in a very lucid manner, in a very detailed manner, in a very correct manner without having any sort of mistake. So you can say that when we are preparing the accounts and financial statement, when we are preparing the audit reports, so the second principle becomes very, very important from the perspective of auditing a company. All right. Then we have next is principle as no single person should be allowed to perform a task single-handedly from beginning to end. So it may be quite possible that X is going to, let's say, for example, passing the check of a person, and X itself is giving the money to the people without even checking in the accounts or in the computer. So it will be quite possible that the computer system is showing something else amount, and X has already paid a hefty amount of money to the client, and at the end of the day we are in a big trouble. It may be quite possible that the auditor will think that you must have done the manipulative activities, but otherwise the truth is something different from that. All right. Then the next is work routine should be so arranged that the work done by an employee is checked by another in the ordinary course. So whatever the way you are preparing the work, whatever the routine that you are preparing, whatever the arrangement that you are going to make, this should always be checked by another employee in the company, and it should not be like this that only the management is going to decide, because management now is in the question rather than the employees of the company. All right. Then next is there should be regular rotation of employees from one workstation to another to minimize errors and frauds. So this is basically the routine activity, and that should not be, challenged. Challenged by anybody, because if one is doing the X activity, so one is going to get the monopoly over this activity only, and any sort of error and fraud that would have been done, because now you are specialized enough in that activity, so that can be done by you. So in order to reduce the errors and fraud, in order to reduce the chance of problems, in order to reduce the occurrence of any sort of problem in the organization, what we are doing is we are doing what we are doing. That means we are rotating the employees, we are arranging the work done by an employee is checked by another. We are also arranging this sort of problem that the no division of person is considered as the should be considered as the helpful in the beginning till the end of the uh, activity. Talking about the internal control and internal check system. So what is the difference between these two items? So let's discuss it one by one in detail. So I told you about the internal check system. I told you about the internal control system. So now only one or two topics are left. That is what we are going to discuss in today's class. But still then, let me decide. So sorry, let me discuss about that. So talking about the internal control and internal check, what we are able to understand here is that in the case of internal control, it consists of the control over all the departments of the organization. So you have sales department, purchase department, you have marketing department, you have, let's say, the production department. So you have control over all these four big departments that are running the company. So internal control system is going to apply on the control over all the departments of the organization, whereas the internal check is basically nothing but a kind of arrangement that we are making against the staff duties. So let's say if the production manager is there, Mr. X is the production manager in the production department. So internal check is saying that we are having a check on the activities done by Mr. X. We are not controlling each and every department. Rather, we are controlling or arranging the staff in a manner so that every person is going to do his or her duty in a very integrated and ethical manner. Then the next is it has a broad scope. So broad scope means that it is a very new paper, and we are not going to be continuing all these sort of activities or the paperwork that is supposed to be given to us, because of the fact that if any sort of error is happening, so we are going to be held accountable or liable for the same. Then, so talking about the scope of the activity, so as I told you, internal control system has a broader scope, and internal check is having the, let's say, a very narrow scope, or you may say even the internal check is a subset of internal control. How? See, we have the production department, we have the marketing department, let's say we have the purchase department, and what we are doing is we are trying to establish the connection between all these three terms, and this can be done only with the help of internal controls. Okay, all right. Now with respect to the internal check, we can say that internal check is nothing but a tool whereby only an employee within the that department, let's say production department, marketing department, or finance department, or the purchase department, we are going to take up those employees or those people under consideration. Next is flexibility. It is more flexible and it is comparatively less flexible. So in the context of internal control, I can say that internal control is बहुत बड़ी चीज़ है that we are going to take up the whole system in a very flexible manner, so that we can make the adjustment as per our own choice, as per our own, you may say, the requirement of the organization. And talking about the internal control, it is comparatively rigid. So I am just going to fix the responsibility of a person, I am going to fix the job that he or she is supposed to do, and apart from that, whatever she or he is doing that is not associated with the perspective of the job which he or she is having, and we are going to take into account this fact that whatever she is going to be taken up, or whatever the activities she is going to decide, it is going to be not only helpful for the organization but also for the people of the department as well. All right. Then the next is objective. So talking about the internal control system. So we have an objective of safeguarding the assets, checking the accuracy of records, and adherence to the policies. So whatever the policy I have prepared, whatever the record I have prepared, whatever the, let's say, assets I have been entrusted to, I am going to safeguard all the assets. I am going to check the accuracy of the record, and I am going to follow the policies that are associated with the organizational perspective. I'm always interested in knowing the fact that whatever the activities I have done, this is going to be fruitful for the organization from the perspective of lot of errors and frauds are going to be happening. So internal control system is actually controlling the whole organization or the whole department. So we have, let's say, 5 different departments. All right. So the production department, the purchase department, the sales department, the advertisement, or you will say the asset department, and the another can be considered as a department who is going to take up the record of each and every department, that what the department X has achieved in this year, what department Y has achieved in this year, and so on and so forth. So this is going to be associated with the internal control. Talking about the internal check, so it prevents and detects errors and fraud. So since of course you have a motorcycle, you don't have on the, let's say, a motorcycle or bike, so that for the purpose of commuting from one place to another place, you don't have some sort of mechanism or the device to carry out the work. So it may be quite possible that whatever the communication you are receiving, whatever the communication you are having from one person to another, this is going to become a basis for the estimation. This is going to become a basis for estimation of the recording of accounts and financial statements. So this is what we are able to understand from the perspective of this internal control system. So at the end, what I can say is that the internal control is a broader perspective than the internal check. Although internal control is going to take up the different big activities or the big department, but the job or role of the internal control is also not very less, because until unless the staff that is dedicated towards this internal control system is not doing the work in a very efficient and effective manner, how you can ensure the fact that every activity that is being done in your organization is completely true, correct, and free from any sort of bias or prejudice. So at the end of this particular point, that is internal check and internal control comparison, what I would say, guys, that we should always be keeping this point in our mind, that internal check and internal control both are nothing but the two sides of one coin. Although internal check is a subset of internal control is bigger than the internal check, but still I would say that it is nothing but the two sides of one coin, whereby we are always considering this fact that whatever the activities we have done in one perspective, the second aspect or the second activity or the second the second aspect is automatically going to be done from this perspective. All right, so this is what we are able to understand from this internal check and internal control. Now I have two more slides for all of you. Let's discuss those two points as well, and then today's class shall be summed up here only. All right, so let me share these as well, just a second. So we have another thing that is named as internal audit. So what internal audit is all about? What are the different ingredients and the process of this internal audit? Let's get to know about it. See, first of all, let's understand this point that the internal audit is something that is going to be done internally, and that too within the organization. That means there is no external auditor, there is no external auditor assigned, or you may say there's no external auditor sent by the organization or the different particular government institution, or as per the compliance of the statutory auditor. You are just keeping somebody as an internal auditor, so that internal audit can be conducted, or the inspection of accounts and financial statements can be taken up. This is the only objective or the sole objective behind this internal control system. So internal audit may be defined as the continuous and systematic process of examining and reporting on the accounting and administrative system of an enterprise. So it seeks to confirm that the management's policies are properly executed and draw attention to those areas where policies are inadequate. All right. So we are going to confirm that the management policies are properly executed. We are going to draw the attention of those areas where the uh, lack of attention is given by the management, and then we are going to verify that the information by the management for control is both accurate and adequate. So both the perspectives are going to be found out from the perspective or point of this consideration. And furthermore, under the company's auditor's report order, CARO 2003, the statutory auditor must report whether, given the nature of size or specified company, prepared are in line with the objectives of the company, as well as the gaps are being filled or gaps are being taken over or not. All right. Then the next is suggesting improvement. So what suggesting improvement is all about? So we are going to take up this point in consideration, that this is going to be the perspective associated with the fact that whatever the internal audit system is going to be there, whatever the internal audit system is going to be specifically there in a place, we are going to check the accounts and financial statement, as well as the principal policies and the mechanism that we are adopting. And we are checking the accuracy of that system, we are checking the reliability of that system, and we are seeing that whether we have been in a situation to get the meaningful data and the meaningful result or not. So this is all what I wanted to discuss with regard to the internal audit. And the last but not the least is that I'm going to take up here is nothing but the internal audit and the internal audit and statutory audit difference. So I'll be discussing this point so that you will be able to understand that what is the difference between these two aspects, internal audit and the statutory audit. So talking about this internal audit, so internal audit is something that we are going to conduct or plan as a matter of policy, because there's a compliance as per the law, like paid up capital 50 lakh if process, or average profit 5 crore process in the last 3 years. So I'm supposed to conduct the internal audit. Now, as per the statutory audit, I'll say that statutory audit is compulsory as per the law, so that we can have an opinion free from any sort of pressure, and independent opinion with regard to the fair view of the concern, or truthfulness and fairness of the accounts and financial statement that is associated with the company. Talking about the scope, so scope of audit is determined by the management in the case of internal audit. So whatever the management is saying, internal auditor is going to check or inspect only that element. But in the case of statutory audit, the auditor is independent and the scope of determined by the law. So the law is saying that as per the statutory audit, cash flow statement, fund flow statement, and financial statement are to be audited. So everything is going to be audited by this person. Talking about the nature, so internal audit is not a legal requirement. It is actually a compliance of certain sort of plans and policy that the company has made. But statutory audit is nothing but the compliance. Statutory audit is not a legal requirement. Sorry, statutory audit is a legal requirement. So as per the rules and regulation or legal laws compliance, we are going to have it. Talking about the qualification, so internal auditor need not to possess the qualification that are mentioned under the law for a statutory auditor. Like statutory auditor must be a practicing CA, but internal auditor can be anybody. Let's say a person who has done the BCom honors is sufficient enough to be prepared or to be, let's say, kept as the internal auditor of a concern. Then talking about the appointment and removal. So appointment and removal of the internal auditor is both in the hands of the management. internal auditor is an employee of the organization. So whatever the control and mechanism system that is associated with the company employee, the same sort of thing is applicable in the case of internal auditor as well. All right. Now talking about the statutory audit, so appointment and removal of an auditor is done by the shareholder and not by the management. With regard to the remuneration, so remuneration of an auditor is decided by the management, and the remuneration of an auditor as a statutory auditor is decided by the shareholders. All right. Then with respect to the report, I would say that report is submitted to the management by the internal auditor, and here the report is submitted to the shareholder in case of statutory audit. Okay. Now, the bigger question before all of us is, can a statutory auditor be an internal auditor or vice versa? Of course, nothing but an internal auditor. So internal auditor is actually an employee of the organization. So whatever the nature of scope of the internal audit is going to be, it is going to be decided by the management. But in the case of statutory auditor, the statutory auditor is appointed by the shareholder, unlike the internal auditor. Even in fact, the duties and responsibilities or the qualification of a statutory auditor is prescribed by the law and not by the management. So therefore, the external auditor, or you may say the statutory auditor, cannot be appointed as an internal auditor for the same company, of course, for the purpose of checking the accounts and financial statements. All right. Or you may say that if, let's say, a statutory auditor has conducted your accounts and financial statement, or audited your accounts and financial statement, now if you want this person to be appointed in your company, you can hire this person as an internal auditor, but thereafter this person cannot work in your company as a statutory auditor. So once it becomes your employee, that same person cannot serve as an statutory auditor. That means internal auditor cannot become statutory auditor, although statutory auditor later on can be hired as an internal auditor as an employee. But again, remember one fact: as soon as the person becomes internal auditor, as soon as the person becomes your employee, you cannot hire that person as a statutory auditor again. This is a proven fact. All right. Now, the last but not the least point is the difference between three bigger dimensions, that is internal control, internal check, and internal audit. So let's briefly understand again a comparison between all these three aspects one by one in a very quickest manner. All right. So talking about the scope, so it comprises the whole system of control, which internal check and internal or which includes internal check as well as internal audit, because internal control is actually taking out the fact that whether the department 1, department 2, and department 3 functions correctly or not. With regard to the internal check, we can say that it is an arrangement of duties among the staff, that the work done by an employee is independently checked by another in the ordinary routine. And with regard to the internal audit, we can say that internal audit means a thorough examination by the company's employees or by an outside agency to review accounting, financial, and other records. Then the next aspect of objective is for internal control, that with respect to the internal control, its objective is to adherence to the policies, safeguarding of the assets, accuracy of records, and timely presentation of reliable information. And with regard to the internal check, we can say that its objective is to increase efficiency and economy of operation and detect errors in frauds. Then, with regard to the internal audit, we can say that it is to state accuracy of information and compliance with plans and policies. Now, talking about the flexibility, the internal control system is more flexible because we are having the control on each and every department. So, whatever the plan and policy that we want to interchange from one to another, that we can do. But the internal check is comparatively rigid because whatever the duty that I have assigned to staff one from the department one, they are supposed to perform that activity only. Although sometimes the duties can be interchanged between S1 to S2 or something like this, but more so comparatively, the duties are going to remain same between the different people in the department. But if I talk about the internal audit, so internal audit is very rigid because you cannot simply cannot change the audit perspective, audit work. If somebody is hired as an auditor, internal auditor, this S1 employee is going to be working like an internal auditor. You cannot change the designation, you cannot change the role, you cannot change the whole perspective of this person. Then the next is staff. So with regard to the internal control system, you can say that management impose internal control on the entire organization. With regard to the internal check, there is no such special staff which is hired for the purpose of this internal control. Unlike the internal control and in the case of internal audit, an internal auditor is appointed by the management. Yaad rakhna, the statutory auditor is appointed by the uh, shareholders and internal auditor is appointed by the management. Then the next is time limit. So in the case of internal control, it is an ongoing process. It's not like this that you are going to do it one day or 2 day. You are going to do it daily. You are going to do it regularly. In the case of internal check, it is a simultaneous activity. It's not a one-day affair. Again, you are going to do it continuously over a period of time. You are not going to do it for one particular activity or for one particular point, for one particular task as such. In the case of internal audit, it starts after the completion of records. Then the next is internal control. So talking about the report, we can say that the department head submit report to the management, and management is going to decide what is to be done with regard to the next aspect. In the case of internal check, the clerk or the clerical head is going to submit the department head the report, and obviously department head is going to submit the report to the management. And in the case of internal audit, the internal auditor is going to submit a report to the management, and the management is going to decide now what is to be done with the different sort of points that we have detected as in, let's say, error and fraud. If we have come across to certain sort of limitations, some certain sort of let's say fraudulent activities or certain sort of activities that are going to be considered as a part and parcel of the point in consideration that is associated with the examination of the perspective of the rules and regulations and the activities of organizing the different initiatives of controlling the activities of the organization and something like this. So internal auditor is going to report directly to the management from the perspective of this point, and we are going to consider this fact and figure in this same aspect or in the same perspective. All right. So this is all about the internal control, internal audit, and the internal uh, check. Lastly, towards the end of this class, I'm going to end my class here only. But before I end my class today, I'll just say 2 3 things. That first and foremost, that whatever the plan of action that we have, whatever the plan of activities that we have decided, whatever the plan of operations that we are doing, we must remember that internal control is bigger enough to accommodate the internal check plus internal audit. So it's like if I write mathematically, So you can say that internal control is equal to internal check plus internal audit. So we are in a situation to control both internal check and internal audit with respect to the internal control, and this is going to be a kind of a mechanism or a kind of an activity whereby we are going to fix all those sort of problems, all those sort of errors, all those sort of frauds that we came across to when we audited the financial statement. So the most important ingredient that we all must remember always, that whatever the action that we are doing, whatever the activities we are doing, we must always keep all these sort of points in consideration with regard to the operations that we are doing, the activities that we are aligned with the organization's capability and the capacity that are associated with the organization's effectiveness and organizations role and responsibility towards the maintenance of different sort of quality and the efficiency of the activities of the organization. So I would say that internal control, internal check, internal audit, all these sort of points are very, very important until unless we don't consider all of them as an important key pillars or elements of the organization. We cannot help the auditor, statutory auditor, to become successful in auditing the financial statement, and we also ourselves cannot call our organization as an organization that is good enough for the purpose of examining the facts and figures and maintaining a good amount of work ethics in our organization. All right. So with this end, I'm going to end my class here only. So I would say only at the end, thank you so much everyone for being the part of my class. That's all with regard to today's class of mine. So we shall meet in the next week, and I shall be discussing in continuation of what we have discussed today. So internal audit, internal check, and internal control. In continuation of that, we will discuss something else in our next class in the next week. All right, guys. Bye bye. Take care. Thank you so much.